This video goes through how to form active participles in all four tenses of the Greek participle, which is section 66 of Hansen and Quinn's Greek, an intensive course. That section is in Hansen and Quinn on pages 204 to 208, and the appendix has it on pages 634 to 637 and 685 to 686. We'll start with the present participle active. Participles are verbal adjectives, so you have to start with the verbal part, and everything for Greek present tense comes from the first principal part. But then we'll need some endings to be able to give them case, number, and gender, which adjectives need. So this blank chart looks like the adjective chart from when you learned adjectives in Unit 4. Unlike the adjectives you learned then, which were in the second declension for the masculine and neuter and the first declension for the feminine, these endings will use the third declension for the masculine and neuter and the first declension, short alpha, for the feminine. So let me show you the nominative and genitive singular of all three genders for present participle active endings. Having the genitive there shows you how we'll do the rest of the endings in the paradigm. You can see in the masculine and neuter what the third declension stem will be. With own, in the genitive it becomes ontos, and so you'll take off the os and have the stem ont. In the neuter, on in the nominative becomes ontos in the genitive, and again you'll take off the os to get a stem ont. And then for the feminine, when you see usa, uses in your nominative and genitive, you can see that it's going to be a short alpha pattern that's going to decline like the feminine noun musa, muses. So let me start by putting in all of those stems before we get the rest of the endings. You can see the regular pattern for neuter where the nominative and the accusative have the same form. You can also see that the vocative is the same as the nominative for all three genders. And here are all the stems in the plural. So let me start putting on the actual rest of the endings. The dative is onti, use, onti. Accusative is onta, usan, on. The vocative, as we said, is on, usa, on. But then in the plural we get ontes, usai, onta in the nominative. Ontone, uson, ontone in the genitive. And then we get to the dative plural. It's trying to be this form in the masculine dative plural, but that's too hard to say. So we smash out the consonants and lengthen the vowel sound into a diphthong, and we get usi with a new movable. The feminine is ice, as you would expect in the plural of the feminine dative, first declension, and then the neuter has the dative plural again. And so it smooshes up exactly the same way it did in the masculine. The accusative plural is ontas, usas, onta. And then the vocative plural is the same as the nominative plural, ontes, usai, onta. Accent is persistent, and you know where that accent is trying to persist by looking at the masculine nominative singular. But since participles don't have dictionary entries, you get the accent of the masculine nominative singular, that own over there, by forming the masculine nominative singular and using the rules for recessive accent to decide where to put the acute. So I'll show you that when we actually have the forms with the verbs. The one place that it won't be persistent is in the feminine genitive plural, so you have to learn that separately. And since you have to know all accents on all verb forms, you really do need to know these. The default translation is verbing, which will usually be a good place to start until you figure out what magical things the participle is doing in the context where you find it. As I mentioned before, the feminine present active participles decline the same way musa does. The dative plural is a troublemaker in more than its formation. The masculine and neuter are going to look like the present active indicative third person plural, and you'll have to use context to tell the difference. Okay, so what does this look like with an actual verb? Let's do the singular first because we're going to need a little elbow room to put all these forms in. Here's our favorite verb, luo, and we're going to go to the first principal part because we're doing something present. And here are all the nice stems from the first principal part without the omega. Here's the masculine participle active singular with all the endings, and now I put that acute recessive over the masculine nominative singular. That tells us where that acute wants to stay in all of the rest of the forms of the present participle active, over that lu if it can, over that upsilon if it can. So here's what that looks like in the rest of the masculine. Luon, luontos, luonti, luonta. Then we get the feminine, and we're going to get its accent, again, trying to stay over the upsilon, but sometimes pulled to the penult because of a long last syllable. And so that's luusa, luuses, luuse, luusan. Here's the neuter. And again, the accents are going to try to stay over that upsilon. And that means we get the circumflex rule over the neuter, nominative, vocative, and accusative singular, because the accent needs to be over the second to last syllable. That syllable is long, that long upsilon, and the last syllable with the omicron is short, and so the accent must be a circumflex. So for the neuter singular present participle active, we get luon, luontos, luonti, and luon. All of these forms mean freeing. It could be of the man freeing something if we have it in the genitive, or perhaps for a woman freeing something if we have a feminine dative singular, and we'll do much more with participles as we start using it. In the plural, here's the masculine with the accents, the feminine with the accents, including that exception in the genitive plural, and the neuter plural with its nice persistent accent. So you'll have to watch your context to tell the difference between they free, the present indicative active third person plural, and freeing, the participle that would be modifying a masculine or neuter dative plural noun. Okay, we'll go more quickly through the other tenses, starting with the future participle active, which will, of course, be from the second principal part, which is where all future active things come from, and then endings. We'll have our lovely chart, and the endings. Why, look at that! All the endings we already know from the present. It's got persistent accent, based on where the accent landed when you put a recessive accent on the masculine nominative singular, except again for that feminine genitive plural. And the default translation is about to verb, but much more often the future participle implies purpose or intention, so a better translation is intending to verb. The damn dative plural poses a problem in the future as well. It looks like the future indicative active third person plural. So we'll have to watch out for that. So here we go. There's the second principal part, and all those nice stems without the omega of the second principal part. And here's the masculine, and the feminine, and the neuter, and we're going to put all those accents in, nice and recessive, and the meaning is intending to free. In the plural, here's the masculine, and the feminine, and the neuter, with our accents. So we get lusantas, which could mean the men intending to free, or lusanton, of the men intending to free, or say in the dative feminine plural lususais with an article, tais lususais, it's the women intending to free or about to free, and so on. Again, you'll have to watch your context to tell the difference between they will free, the future indicative active third person plural, and intending to free, the future participle modifying a masculine or neuter dative plural noun. Okay, now let's go to the aorist participle active. It has to be principle part 3, of course, because it's aorist and active, but we're not indicative, so we're going to take off that augment. Plus endings to make that verbal stem have adjective characteristics, and here's our chart to put them in. All right, so let's see what we get for our nominative and genitive in all 3 genders. As, asa, an, antos, ases, antos. You can see again we've got a third declension, first declension, third declension pattern, and we have nice characteristic alphas of the aorist. So the stems look like this. You can see I left the neuter accusative and vocative just like the nominative neuter accusative and vocative in the singular, and actually all the vocatives are the same as the nominatives. So let's put in all those other endings. We've already got as, asa, an in the nominative, antos, ases, antos in the genitive. Now we've got anti, ase, anti, anta, asan, an. And now we're in the plural, antes, asai, anta, anton, ason, anton. And I've stuck here on the damn dative plural, where you can see what the forms are trying to be. But again, Greek will squeeze out those consonants and replace them with a longer vowel sound, in this case, just a long alpha. They also have a new movable. The rest of the endings go like this: asais in the dative feminine plural, antas, asas, anta in the accusative plural, and then the vocative, again the same as the nominative, antes, asai, anta. Accent is persistent by the same rules as before. Do recessive accent on the masculine nominative singular, and then treat it as persistent for the rest of the cases, genders, and numbers. So it's useful to remember that that's a long alpha in the masculine nominative singular. The default translation is verbing, just like the present. Sometimes the difference between the two, present and aorist participle, is only about aspect, but sometimes it does have something to do with time, and we'll have to worry about that as we start to work with participles in sentences. Now, let's see if we can have the words with actual endings on them on our favorite verb. And we're going to need the third principal part, and we're going to take off the epsilon and the alpha for all of our stems, loose, and they're going to get these nice aorist endings, and all the accents, which again are trying to be persistent on the upsilon of the stem, and so most of the time that's where they land. Lusas, lusasa, luson, lusantos, lusases, lusantos, lusanti, lusase, lusanti, lusanta, lusasan, lusan. All of these mean freeing. In the plural, we're going to have the stems with our masculine, feminine, and neuter endings, and all of the accents, again with that exception in the feminine genitive plural. And we get lusantes, lusasi, lusanta, lusanton, lusason, lusanton, lusasi, lusasais, lusasi, lusantas, lusasas, lusanta. All of them still mean freeing. You'd think now we could move right on to perfect participles, but you perhaps forgot about the second aorist. The second aorist, participle active, follows the same rules as the first aorist. It comes from the third principal part without the augment, and then you need endings to give them adjective qualities, and it still means verbing. But because second aorist verbs have those odd third principal parts, we'll need different endings from the regular or first aorist endings. And so here they are. And hey, look at that. They are exactly the same endings as the present and future active participle endings. So that's easy. But they're going to have different looking accents, which will help us see that they're aorists and not presents or futures. And those accents are going to be fixed on the first syllable of the ending, which means you can learn them on the ending, including the feminine genitive plural, which again does that strange putting it on the omega of the very end. But otherwise, it follows this regular first syllable of the ending pattern, and it's fixed right there. So I wonder what all of this will look like with a real verb. Now this time, of course, it has to be lepo, our only second aorist verb so far. We go to the third principal part, and we take off the augment, and we take off the on, the ending of the first person singular indicative, which is what we don't need to have our stem. And there's our stem in all of the cases and numbers and genders, or all of the cases and genders in the singular, rather. And then we're going to put on those masculine endings here already with the accent, lipon, lipontos, liponti, liponta. And then the feminine endings, already with their accents, lipusa, lipuses, lipuse, lipusan. And then the neuter, lipon, lipontos, liponti, lipon. And it means leaving. In the plural, we get the masculine with its accent already nicely fixed on the ending, lipontes, liponton, lipusi, lipontas. In the feminine, lipusai, lipuson, lipusais, lipusas, and then in the neuter, liponta, liponton, lipusi, liponta. Okay, now we can go on to the perfect participle active. All perfect active forms come from the fourth principal part, and we'll need endings in all of the cases and numbers and genders to let it behave as an adjective. And so here we have our nominative and genitive in the singular, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Os, uia, os, autos, uias, autos. So again, you can see that we've got that third, first, third pattern. And in the feminine, not only do we have a short alpha first declension, we also get to use the unusual diphthong upsilon iota, which we're going to pronounce ui. So the stems look like this. Again, I left the neuter accusative and vocative just like the nominative in the singular, and all of the vocative singular like the nominative singular. Let's get all the rest of those endings in. So we've got os, uia, os, autos, uias, autos, auti, uia, auti, auta, uian, os, vocative singular os, uia, os, autes, uiai, auta in the in the nominative plural, genitive plural, auton, uion, auton, and now we're stuck again on the damdative plural, which wants to look like this. And this time, when Greek cleans it up to make it more pronounceable, the sigmas just swallow up those taux, and the omicron stays short and leaves it at that. So the endings are aussie, and they also can both have a new movable. The rest of the endings are uiais in the dative plural feminine, autas, uias, auta, and then vocative plural, autes, uiai, auta. The accent is fixed again on the first syllable of the ending. So once again, you could simply learn them on the endings, and they'll look like this. The default translation is having verbed. So let's see this at work. Fourth principal part, we're going to take off the alpha to have our stem, and then the masculine, we're going to get lelukos, lelukatos, lelukati, lelukata. The feminine, leluquia, leluquias, leluquia, leluquion. And then the neuter, lelukos, lelukatos, lelukati, lelukos, all of which mean having freed. Let's move to the plural, and we're going to get lelukates, lelukaton, lelukasi, lelukatas in the masculine, feminine leluquia, leluquion, leluquiais, leluquias in the feminine plural, and then finally neuter plural, lelucata, lelucaton, lelucasi, lelucata. Again, all of these mean having freed, and you're going to learn all sorts of wonderful ways to use those participles in all of the cases and genders and numbers. So, lots of forms there for the active participles, but they're mostly first and third declension endings that you know, with predictable participle stems to turn those good old principal parts into verbal adjectives. Stay tuned now for the video for section 67, which will teach you the middle and passive participles.